Okay, folks, welcome to the Undaunted Man in the Arena podcast. And as you can see, it's just me today. Co-host Chuck is on assignment and on a different mission today. He will be back next time. That's why there's no great intro music, and it's just me. And maybe we're going to have some stilted or janky back and forth cuts between me and our special guest. And this is episode 13 of the Undaunted Man in the Arena podcast, which you can find at theundauntedpodcast.com. And I want to welcome our special guest today, former city councilor and longtime educator, Theresa Stehly. Thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Joe.
This is going to be exciting because we're going to talk about a couple different things today, and timely. We're going to talk about your time on the Sioux Falls City Council. You were a long-time educator at USF, as well as doing some piano lessons for a lot of kids in this town for a long time. And then we're going to talk about your experience with the recount. And hopefully folks here over the long 4th of July weekend will listen, and maybe they'll glean some insights from your experience on the recount. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so Theresa, first thing we like to do with everybody is we want to find out about your background.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about yourself.
Well, I grew up in Mobridge, South Dakota. My father worked for Wells Fargo. Back then it was First National Bank. And so he was promoted several times, which led to us moving to Britain, South Dakota, where I graduated from. And then I went to college at NSU. Then Dad was transferred to Millbank again to actually build a new bank there. So we moved around a little bit there. But my years at Northern were so fabulous, wonderful time and wonderful education. And then I taught in Eureka, South Dakota. And then at that point, I was thinking about being a nun. That was, people may not know that about me, but I've always had a very strong connection to many different orders of nuns. And I wanted to serve the Lord in a big way. And so that led me to getting a job at St. Mary's here in Sioux Falls. And even though I didn't become a nun, a sister, I have actually led a life somewhat like a nun would be. And my goal in life is to help people. And I've been trying to do that my whole life, and to be an advocate and to lift people up.
Hold on. Okay, folks, we're going to pick up where we left off. I had to check the door just now for a package delivery. Theresa, one of the big things I wanted to get into with you, though, is how'd you get to Sioux Falls, though? You said you had a job at St. Mary's. How do you go from Eureka, South Dakota, to coming to Sioux Falls after, wanting to live a life as a nun?
Well, because I knew the presentation nuns, so they gave me the job at St. Mary's. And I remember Sister Mary Jane Gasper said to me in the interview, she said, "Theresa, we don't pay a lot, but it could lead to other things." And I said to her years later, "Sister, it certainly did lead to other things," because I've had a very, very rich, diversified life and fabulous life, many different chapters. So getting politically involved, down the road, 30 some years later, was not ever my intention. But that certainly has become a part of who I am.
What parish are you in? What church do you go to?
Well, I'm a member of St. Therese. But now getting into the next chapter, I've spent the last 6 years, and we're going to talk about this perhaps, but I was able to spend 6 years teaching music on the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. And let me just go backwards. When I was teaching at St. Mary's, as many would know, they're the most affluent children in town doctors, lawyers' kids, and they were wonderful to teach. But way back then, I always had a sense, and this was back in like 1987, 86, I wanted to work with Native American children. I felt that my energy was being wasted on these children that had so much at St. Mary's. I wanted to give back to children that had nothing. And it's so, to me, miraculous that here at late in my life, I'm able to go and teach. I hadn't been in the classroom for 35 years. And I got to go into this situation in McLaughlin, South Dakota, and work with these children for 6 years. Amazing.
Well, it is amazing, and I want to get into that. And you've had quite the amazing life. So from the late 80s, you're an educator, and then at some point in time, you found USF, right?
Right. And in the late 80s, so I left St. Mary's, and I had a lot of piano students. So I thought I started teaching privately, and kind of a risk, but I did it. And then I was offered a job starting a choir at Holy Spirit. Monsignor Androsco was starting this choir. He was starting the church. So I started directing an adult choir, started that at Holy Spirit, was there 13 years. And then in the midst of that, I had joined St. Therese because once again, I felt that little wonderful church needed my resources more than St. Mary's and Holy Spirit.
Did you know my wife's uncle, Bill Vermullum, Butch Vermullum?
Bill Vermullum was in my choir.
Yeah.
And Evelyn.
Yeah.
Bill's my guy.
Okay, so
he was with me.
Yeah.
I taught Bill how to sing. Bill, I love Bill.
So
yes.
Bill is my mother-in-law's twin brother over there at Holy Spirit. My wife and I, we've been members of Holy Spirit the entire time we've lived in Sioux Falls. And it's probably it's an episode for another podcast, but I wasn't originally Catholic. I wasn't born Catholic. I was a Presbyterian, became a Catholic. You know, my wife, I'll tell you the whole conversion story on another episode.
Sure.
But it's a small world here in Sioux Falls. But Bill was my wife's uncle, and he got us into Holy Spirit as well.
Wonderful man. Wonderful. Evelyn was wonderful. Yes. So I worked with them, and then I was offered a job starting the St. Therese adult choir with Father Simple in 2000. Yeah, 2000. And I was there for 21 years until COVID came.
Yeah, in the 2020. 2019.
Yes, so that was just amazing to be there as well. So directing, working with adults, and teaching piano and USF, and I mean the whole thing. Plus, I've taught gardening classes for the school district. I'm a driver's ed instructor. So I've been able to do a lot of different things.
Yeah, and you knew Monsignor Androsco and Father Morgan and all those guys, and then Father Morgan went down to the cathedral, and now he's moved on from there too, apparently. So
yes, I was just there last Sunday. It's his last Sunday. He's going out to Pierre.
How did you? I think this is what we want to start digging into, though, is at some point in time, you wanted to go beyond just serving children, serving the kids, and you wanted to go into serving the community in elected office. Tell me how, because what we like to talk about is people's origin story. We like to figure out, and I think that's what the public also likes to figure out, is what makes you tick and what makes you do what you want to do. How did you get involved in city politics?
Well, first of all, I've always been a very persistent, justice-oriented person. But in 1997, I started the Neighborhood Watch program in my neighborhood. Thanks be to, I believe, Gary Hansen and Dave Munson, former mayors, started that program. I'm a huge advocate of that. And so I started having picnics and bringing people together because I realized when I bought my house in 93 at an auction, by the way, that neighbors didn't know each other.
What neighborhood were you in?
Van Epps and 24th. I'm still there. And so that was my first step into just civic engagement that way. But then I got to meet Kermit Stager's Vernon Brown in about 2005. I was doing some boulevard gardening, and somebody I had flowers in the boulevard, being inspired by the McKinnon Park Boulevard flowers. And they were doing some construction on my road, and one of the workers said, "You're not supposed to have any flowers on the boulevard." And so I went and talked with Dave Munson and Steve Metley, and they both said, "Oh, that's fine. Flowers are okay." And then that proceeded on to another thing in 2015.
You mean somebody actually told you they didn't want flowers inside the boulevard? Who told you that?
Well, because there was an ordinance that you couldn't have anything over, I'm going to say, 8-9 inches on the boulevard. That's owned by the city. So those of us who had started doing things creatively were really in violation of the ordinance. But I got the blessing of Steve Metley,
oh yeah,
the city planner, and
long time city planner,
and Dave Munson, our mayor at the time. So I was fine with that. Now in 2015, that another thing happened with that. We had to delve in, and
we're going to get into that. Yeah.
But anyway, so then I got sucked into this whole thing really in 2006. Now, backtrack to 2005, they had that vote in the wintertime. Were you here then? 2005?
I was.
Okay, and that they had that big wreck thing on over on Cliff and 10th, Nelson Park.
Yeah, we need to get into, whenever you talk to Theresa Stehly, we have to get into Snowgates.
But that's next.
Yeah,
okay, but
we'll get into that. So tell the first story before
but yeah,
that
I mean,
one.
the first thing is they had that first vote. Remember, it was in the winter time. They were trying to pass this huge indoor facility. I had nothing to do with that. All I did was vote, and that vote went down in flames. And so the people, of course, pushing for that indoor facility there at Nelson Park were upset.
So what was I think listeners, viewers are really interested in, city history and stuff like that. So take just a moment, kind of step back and just explain what was going on. And this is important because we've seen this recently too with the expansion of city facilities and Frank Olson Park, a swimming pool, which now is going to turn into this huge $48 to $52 million with interest facility or something to that effect. I mean, so let's dig in a little bit and tell me what was going on in the neighborhood at that time and what the opposition was to the facility.
Well, I'm not sure what the price tag was, but they had gotten Avera to come on board to be some kind of sponsor. But I don't think the public was interested in this huge indoor facility replacing the outdoor swimming pool at the time. And they had a big committee, a bunch of high-powered people pushing for this, and the vote went down. It was pretty simple.
What do you think was from your experience at the time, what was the main opposition to?
Well, the public didn't have an appetite for a huge indoor facility that they were going to be subsidizing. So right after that, the discussion became, what will we do with this pool, this Drake Springs outdoor pool? I grew up swimming outdoors in Mobridge. I loved swimming. I think neighborhood swimming is important. And so they were debating, do we make this $12 million indoor pool or a $4.7 million outdoor pool? And I called the council members. It was terrifying. This was my first experience dealing with the city. I'm calling these people, and some of them didn't call me back. Some of them were rude. But
who was on the council at that time?
Kevin Kavanaugh, Vernon Brown was there, D. Knutson, Bob Jameson. Who else was there?
Surprise, surprise. Yeah. Some of them were rude.
Yeah.
We have rude city councilors?
Yes. And just Pat Costello. So D. Knutson, to her credit, she was very nice. And she took notes while I was telling her why I thought she'd be should be an outdoor pool. So I said what I said, and then they did the vote, and it turns out that they voted for an indoor pool. And at the time, I thought, well, forget it. It's indoor pool. And then the Argus had a big editorial of city gives itself a gold-plated indoor pool, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, maybe it's not as popular as these elected officials think. And then my dear friend Kermit Stagers, at that point, he was just my council representative. I didn't know him. But
and you were in the Central District, right?
And we have been talking, and he calls me up, and it was right before Labor Day. He said, Theresa, you could do a initiative petition drive. I'm like, oh, I don't think so. I mean, that was like the last thing I wanted to get involved with. And
this would have been Labor Day 2005, right?
2006.
06, okay.
And anyway, he ends up kind of, I thought about it, prayed about it. There was another gal, Cheryl Rath, we had both spoken at the council. Oh, and then let me circle back to Dee Knudsen. Before they did the vote for the indoor pool, Dee, to her credit, she calls me. She had taken notes when I reached out. She encouraged me to come and speak to the council, which was huge.
Absolutely.
Very few people. I did that constantly when I was on the council because Dee had taught me about that action that we can take as citizens. Most of my colleagues on the council would have, they just close the door on people. They don't need to hear from the citizens. But anyway, Dee did, and I showed up and I spoke. It was scary. I spoke, and she called me afterwards and told me I did a great job. And I mean, it was just so warm. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Dee.
And I may disagree with her politics, but I agree. Very nice people. She's a very nice person. But it is so few and far between with elected people to conduct themselves like that, isn't it?
Absolutely. To actually embrace people being a part of the process. I mean, look at our own Mayor Paul. He takes public input. Now, this is going on a side road here, but when I was fighting to keep public input at the beginning of the meeting, letting people speak, and he wanted it at the end. I think Paul, God bless you, Paul, but I think Paul would have been happy if we would have just cut it out totally. And
well, no offense to Paul Tenhaken, but he'd probably be okay with no public input whatsoever.
I do believe.
I mean,
yes.
I've seen how he conducted himself with regard to public input, and it's unflattering. But additionally, I think there were some unconstitutional actions taken by him in wanting to. I mean, here's the thing. You can't cut people off during public input time. If your policy says you get 3 minutes, they get 3 minutes. And here's the deal. If they want to yell at you, if they want to cuss at you, if they want to swear at you, the Constitution's very clear and the case law is as long as it's not fighting words, they can come up there and say what they want. And here's the thing. People who are secure intellectually, emotionally with themselves, they can take it. They're secured. They know who they are. They know how they conduct themselves.
Absolutely.
They'll just sit there. You listen to it.
Exactly.
The public just wants an opportunity to vent.
Yes. Yes.
And if you view yourself through the lens of being the whipping boy, which is problematic, then you're never going to like it. But if you view yourself as a public servant through the lens of, I'm providing you the service of being able to vent here and take it, and I will facilitate that for you, it philosophically, intellectually makes it much easier for the public servant to take it.
Well,
and there's just some politicians who just can't take it.
I fought for public input to stay at the beginning. When Paul got elected, well, even before that, they were talking about changing it. I was always showing up as a citizen, fighting to keep that at the beginning of the meeting. Paul got elected. He and I, we went, the whole council, we were having this big conversation behind the scenes about keeping that at the beginning. And that's when he appeased me by saying, well, okay, we'll keep it at the beginning. It's going to be 3 minutes. And I think it was a total of 30 minutes that they got to speak. But as soon as I was out of office, then they immediately shoved it to the back of the meeting.
Yeah, well, there's a whole number of things that happened after you got into office. But let's go back to your political origin story, which is Labor Day 2006. You're running the petition drive.
So
what happened next?
We do the petition drive, and I mean, it was just like wildfire. People jumping onto this Drake Springs thing, and I had volunteers coming. And dear Sue Roust, I hope she won't mind me saying this. She was our county auditor, and Sue said to me, she said, Theresa, if you put your cause on the back of the clipboard, it can help. And I did. Outdoor pool, yes. And so
how many signatures did you have to gather?
I think back then, I'm going to say like 4,700 or something.
Okay, so and at this point in time, you have assembled some kind of team of...
Yeah, I had these seniors, unfortunately, a lot of them have died, but they were coming forth, and I'd have them down there at the courthouse in groups of 2, or the county administration building in groups of 2s, but people, it was just huge.
Well, this is 20 years ago, and
yes.
Obviously you lived in the Central District, and the Central District has changed in the last 20 years as well. I mean, you look at the politics of it, and we can get into that right away. But what I want to get into this issue is 20 years ago. What was the animating factor, though? Was it property taxes? Was it?
It was keeping an outdoor pool.
Fiscal responsibility.
No,
what was it?
It was an outdoor pool, and I wanted an outdoor pool for those kids. Okay. Those kids living north of 10th Street. They wanted to put in this big mammoth indoor thing, and I just thought children should be able to be outside. I wasn't opposed to an indoor pool. I just wanted to keep an outdoor pool. And some council members said, "Oh, they can ride their bikes over to Terrace Park." Can you imagine some kid riding their bike from the Drake Springs over to Terrace Park? I mean, like, are you just like checked out or what? I even took
that is them waving their magic wand and waving the problem away.
Well, it also just being so disconnected and
right.
just so not compassionate. But I drove every pool on my car and took the mileage, and each one was like 1.5 miles away from the other. So I said, someplace in our history, the city fathers said, let's have these pools strategically placed so children can have a chance to be outdoors.
And you made the ballot.
So we got it. We got it on there, and they were threatening us. I had to go to the Attorney General who has died. Thank Janklo's Attorney General, Mark Meyer Henry, and he liked my cause, and so without any charge, he looked over the petition before we started because they were threatening that it was going to be thrown out. And you know, when you're the little guy and you've got the mammoth city against you, you just don't have the resources.
Well, just reflect back. People can reflect back on recent history right now with the data center petition drive, which was during the middle of the winter. You have this uncanny ability, though, to do petition drives during relatively nice weather for some reason. And you have a history, I think, and this is what people need to know. You've led multiple successful petition drives.
Well, the Drake Springs, yes. And that, by the way, won by a landslide. And they still haven't forgiven us. The swim team wanted that indoor one for their kids, the south part of town. And they still haven't forgiven us for doing that.
Maybe the swim team can pay for it then.
Well, but how dare citizens step into government? Father knows best. It's the same players that are trying to run the city today. I'm just telling you, when you look at people's political donors, it's the same people that we know what's best. The rest of you just step back, let us take over. And unfortunately, in our mayor's race, we could have a big seat at the table for those people versus just the average citizen. But that's another subject. But
so when did the election take place on the pool issue?
It was in June of 2006.
Okay, so June, and then overwhelming margin.
No,
city
excuse me, 2007, because we
right,
had a year.
the
Yeah,
next year. Yeah.
that's right. Yes.
So you referred it. You referred the decision. That was through a petition drive.
An initiative, yes.
Yeah. Oh, it was the initiative
It was
process.
an initiative. So
Okay.
yeah, and people need to understand the difference there,
Yeah.
And so they had already voted on this. So we weren't doing a referendum, which
Okay.
gives you 20 days.
Right.
No, we did a whole different approach of saying we will have an outdoor pool. It didn't address the indoor pool whatsoever.
And for those listeners who need to understand the critical distinction between the initiative and referendum. The referendum is when the city council passes a certain law, spending measure, whatever, and you get 20 days.
Right.
Which is what the data center people did, because they were referring a zoning decision. But what you were doing is you initiated a measure that you were not going to refer the indoor big building issue. What you were going to do is you were going to say, keep the outdoor pool, the pool, right?
Right.
Is that what was going on? Okay.
Well, exactly.
And then you end up going to an election and it wins overwhelmingly.
That is right.
Okay.
And they built Drake Springs. Now we allocated $4.7 million, and because that was the number they were throwing out. And I was going to the park board meetings. Ann Hayek was there, and I was trying to say to get a handle on what they were reviewing, and it was looking to me like this thing wasn't quite playing out the way it was supposed to be, what we had intended, just a regular pool. And they kind of told me to butt out. And they start building it, and they got this postage stamp for a swimming pool. And I was told, oh, well, you didn't put enough money in that in your petition ordinance wording to allow us to build a regular pool. Well, we didn't want all this bells and whistles stuff.
So what did they do? They built all the bells and whistles around a little tiny pool?
Yes. Well, you just go there and you'll see.
Well,
yes.
yeah.
And they've got the slide, and they've got the lazy river that people enjoy. And so but nonetheless, we did that. And then people were, encouraging me to run for city council. And so I did. I ran against Vernon Brown. He was the incumbent in 2008. And he won. Fine. I learned a lot. And then in 2010, the Central District was open.
Vernon had parlayed a career as a newscaster for Kelloland into, and at some point, so a lot of people knew who Vernon was.
Yes.
His face and his voice were on TV all the time. He was in people's homes, had wide
recognition,
name recognition, high name ID, and at some point in time, he leaves Kelloland, goes into the private sector. I think he was working for SDN back then, and he becomes city councilor. And was he city councilor at large, or was he in the Central District?
He was at large.
He was at large. Okay. And then who was the Central District? Was it still Kermit Stagers
It was Kermit,
at the time?
yes.
Okay.
Kermit.
So what happened next then for you?
Well, then so I ran against Vernon, and then I ran in 2010. That was an open seat against it was Michelle Erpenbach, and she had been on the park board for the pool. So I'd already done a debate during the pool situation, and she was on the debate. It was Kermit and I and Cheryl Rath, and then she was Michelle Erpenbach, and I think maybe someone else. But anyway, I had already participated in those kinds of activities, and so I ran against her in 2010, and back then, there was a force at work. It was called the Women's Political Caucus. Have you ever heard of them?
Not at all.
Oh,
What was their deal?
They were like an abortion protection group. Lots of big names of women in Sioux Falls in this.
So really a lot of liberal women involved in this effort. But
elected officials, people, high-profile people. And I'm very pro-life.
Right.
I have friends across who are not on the same camp as I am, but I believe in loving all people.
Why were these pro-abortion people getting involved in city politics?
That because that's a good point, Joe, because abortion has never come up in my experience in the city world. But they wanted
they wanted
pro-choice people elected.
They wanted pro-choice people up and down the ballot, and ostensibly they probably wanted to create a pipeline of candidate recruitment into the future. Is once you get on the city council, then you go to the legislature, et cetera.
Exactly. Yeah. And so they sent out a questionnaire and wanted us to commit to supporting pro-choice issues, and I called them. I said, I can't participate in this. I'm sorry. I will certainly represent everyone on the city council if I'm elected, but I can't sign this. Michelle did, and she was endorsed by them.
Yeah, Michelle Erpenbach, for those folks know, she's been involved in longtime liberal causes, things like that.
And she, this is just factual. And so in 2010, of course, I've never had a lot of money. In any campaign, and I've actually, I won't take money from anybody who is going to have any hooks attached to it. But
Amen.
She had people out there putting stickers on doors and things. The pro-choice people were helping her, So I knew I was going to lose that one, and so that's fine. I lost, and after that, Joel, I said no more running. That's it. I will never run again. Losing is not easy.
A lot of people say that after losing a race, though. My experience is, look, just this last recent go-round, some of the people who lost their races came to me, I'm never doing that again. I'm not going to do it again.
Right.
And I'm like, we'll see about that. I know it's not easy to lose a race. Sometimes it's not easy for people to win a race. In fact, I know candidates right now I know some people who lost, they refuse to call the winner of the race and congratulate them. Mm-hmm. They are sore losers. Mm-hmm. And if there's anything I hate, mm-hmm. Theresa, it's a sore mm-hmm. loser. Just call the other person up and say,
yes,
good job. But what happened with you?
You watch how the grace that they have.
Right.
That, but.
So you lose this race, and you're like, I'm never gonna run again.
And that was exactly it. And then I was going on great life 2010, moving forward, and then in 2015, Greg Jameson calls me, Theresa. I was having a great summer. Theresa, they're talking about changing the gardening ordinance, the boulevard gardening ordinance, changing that. I'm like,
Greg, and at this point in time,
he was
just
on
so
the
folks
council.
know, Greg was on the city council,
and so was old Dean Karski. So was Rick Kiley. Okay, so now we're gonna.
Rick must have been newer at that time, right?
But he was the head of this whole gardening ordinance thing, and they had just gone through chickens. They had done the chicken ordinance. You remember that?
Sounds productive.
Chickens and goats, and so we got that ironed out the year before. Well, then this gardening thing comes
just
up.
As a side note. So let me jump in here. Just as a side note regarding urban chickens or goats or horses or whatever. So just 2 blocks away from here, where we're sitting now, there's a lady who has chickens.
Okay.
And this is, just so you know, this area that you're sitting in here, this is my precinct, this is my mm-hmm. county commission district, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. I know all these people here. Mm-hmm. They know me. I go knock on their door. Yes. They're like, get your petition signed. And this lady and her mom live in this house right over here, and they moved here from California during COVID. And they have chickens, and they're like, Aarons, you need to come out back and feed the chickens again. And I'm like, I'm thinking back to that whole thing about the city council ordinance fight over how many chickens are we going to have? Are we going to have 4 or 6 or 10? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, don't we have better things to talk about?
Well, and we did that.
But it's a property rights freedom issue.
Beekeeping ordinance. Janet Brecky and I did beekeeping. And Christine Erickson, by the way, did not like that whatsoever.
Well, and not only that, Theresa, but just so people understand, a lot of some of this stuff may seem inconsequential in comparison to, buildings and things like that, but it's a property rights freedom issue.
Yes.
And last time I checked, we live in America, not China. If you want to have a chicken in your backyard, go ahead. But the beekeeping thing, I think what we're starting to understand here in this country in terms of the value of bees and the role that they play in the ecosystem is very important. Now, I get it. Not everybody wants an apiary in their backyard neighborhood.
Exactly.
I get it. We can't have that. But they do play an important role in our environment, and I think people are starting to figure that out now.
Yes, and luckily we did get that established, so you can do that.
But why did Christine not like it?
I think probably because we proposed it.
Oh, okay.
Which is it. I mean, there were things. This is on a separate thing, but with Erickson is that unless she was in charge of it, she was not open to listening to other ideas.
Well,
and
pardon the pun, but you know what they call that?
What?
Queen bee syndrome. Okay. Anyway.
Okay. Well, anyway. Okay. So, but back to they're
Jameson
back in
calls
2015. Yeah. And so I went to this one of the task force meetings that Rick Kiley was running, and I got this sense early on that they were on their way to limiting it to like 12 inches or less. And a lot of my stuff is bigger, and
they're flowers, they grow big.
Well,
I
how
get
about
it.
mailboxes?
Yeah.
So I took it upon myself to drive. I drove all over town with friends with me, and we got the addresses and photos. I went north, south, east, west, and I got boulevards, pictures, and addresses. Anybody who had anything going on in their boulevard.
Yep.
And I had a postcard made up at my own expense, and I mailed it to these people.
Did you go to the mayor's boulevard? Did you go to the mayor's house and see if he had anything in his boulevard?
I don't think that Mike Huther did at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think he did.
All right.
But his neighbors did. So anyway, I mailed it.
His mansion. His mansion probably didn't have...
But they might have had a mailbox with decorative rocks, or people did all sorts of things all over town. I mailed these postcards out with the addresses and emails, with the phone numbers, emails of all the council members. Protect your boulevard garden. I had a beautiful picture of a zinnia, and boy, did those counselors hear from the public. And what I've learned is if you do not get in front of an issue as a citizen before it gets on the track, you can't stop it. You've got to talk to the council at the very front end of situations, because it gets so far down the pipeline and the council refuses to change course.
They get blinders on at some point.
They can't do it. Yeah. And maybe it's a part of a pride issue that you can't change your mind. But that's why I tried to bring people in, even as a counselor, to the informational, speak at the first reading. I will give Paul credit for that. He did start opening up the first reading so people could talk then.
He did.
Because the council, the council has to hear from the public. There's two sides to these stories, not just the developer and not just the department head side. You got to hear from the people. You've got to do site visits. You got to enter into their world and see what they're talking about. And I want people to be represented. And let me just,
was there any opposition to this boulevard ordinance?
No, well, just Rick Kiley.
Well, of course, I would
just
expect
Counselor Kiley.
I would expect that from him,
that they wanted. But and Mark Cotter, and thank you. I love Mark. He's been responsive. But they were kind of trying to analyze it and say, well, this blah blah blah. Anyway, they ended up, because people started coming forward, they made a beautiful gardening ordinance, and so we can encourage people to beautify that, and it's better for the environment. And they're even talking now about more of a rain garden effort to try to keep water from going runoff into the sewer system.
Fantastic. So we can put gardens in our boulevards now in Sioux Falls. Just don't put a campaign sign in your boulevard. You probably get an email from the mayor about it.
Well, yes. Well, otherwise, yeah. So anyway, that happened, and that was 2015. And Kermit, my dear friend, had lost the mayor's race in 2010, and then I encouraged him to run, and then he developed cancer.
Right.
And so he called me up that in 2016 in February. He told me he wasn't running again. I felt so sad. And Rex Ralphing was making comments about getting rid of public input. And it was
what is up with these people where they don't like the public input?
You know what Ralphing told me when I got elected? He said, that guy was out to get me. And he said, you can't let the tail wag the dog. I said, are you calling citizens a tail? I mean, what? He got David Fifely to, tell me I could not be interacting with these citizens. They were trying to just tie my hands. And
you mean while you were on the council?
Yes, on the council.
They didn't want you asking questions.
They didn't want me, going to boards and I was encouraging citizens to come to meetings and to utilize their rights. Second considerations if there was a rezone they didn't like. I was an advocate for citizens.
It all seems so insecure to me.
Well, what we need, going back to what you talked about, people violating their rights, Joe, we need a hero in Sioux Falls. We need a legal hero. We need people to stand up on the outside in the constituent citizen world and say this is wrong, because nobody has the guts to stand up to our mayor and the whole city staff. People are just sitting by, talking behind the scenes. Nobody has the guts to stand up and say, this is wrong. So they're able to do all sorts of stuff. I'm also going to say, having the health director as a county commissioner is totally, totally wrong. Who let that happen?
Well, he's only got 6 months left.
But it doesn't matter. There has to be somebody has to come in here and say, we're going to clean this out. We're going to bring integrity back in so that we have people doing what they're supposed to be doing, but we don't have all of these relationships under the surface that are just feeding each other.
Should there be an ordinance in Sioux Falls that prevents city employees from holding elected office?
Absolutely. We have Matt Nelson, and he is, by the way, Matt Nelson is one of the instigators of that parking ramp. That parking ramp down there, which I stood against right from day one. Matt Nelson told us we had to have this, but we don't have enough parking. I mean, that guy got a lot of power.
Well, I know Matt. I served in the Army Reserve with him, and I sat down and talked with him before he was running for the county commission. I didn't endorse him. I didn't support him. I thought there were other better candidates. I like Matt. He's a good guy, but let me tell you this. Was it Matt making the decisions, or was it the mayor?
He shouldn't have been able to run for the county commission. That, and he didn't make it. But I ask, that's either saying the county commission is such a low requirement job, you just show up for the meeting, or, what's going on here?
Look,
and then we have a guy, the head of Lights and Power, going to legislature in Pierre, a city director going to the legislature. I was going to go talk to the council when this is all over with the mayor's race and say, hey, is he taking time off? How does for the taxpayers now, how are you going to handle him being gone?
Yeah, you're talking about Jerry Jungling.
I am.
One of the issues that we have, though, is you have on the surface this mayor telling everyone. In fact, he just put a Facebook post out today. We're too divisive and we don't talk to each other enough. And I'm like thinking to myself, hold on a minute here. You want to talk about divisiveness? I'll litigate that issue with you. But you have seen, I believe, a coordinated effort to get city employees into key positions of power in Minnehaha County, maybe to a smaller extent, Lincoln County.
And the Board of Ethics
but well, that's a whole nother.
That's a stacked deck.
That's a whole nother
deck.
That's a whole nother mess right there. But let me ask you this. Let's go back to this issue. Do you think the Sioux Falls City Council should, and then would, they pass an ordinance that prevents outside employment for elected office?
Absolutely. And and if they didn't do it, then the citizens can do an initiative. Put that on the ballot.
Oh, I think that'd be interesting.
I cannot see any citizen saying that's a good deal.
I mean, shouldn't you be at your desk doing your job?
Shouldn't you? Yes.
Who's going to cover down for the employee while they're gone for 3 months out in the legislature?
Well, that's exactly the question. Yeah. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. And it's Christine Erickson and the mayor that have really taken this endorsement thing. That's a whole nother thing. Janet Brecky brought that in front of the ethics board. You know, can you be out there endorsing, working for people while you're elected?
I love Janet, and I would love to talk to the story about Tin Haken interacting with her during her reelection. But I think at the end of the day, some of those things are shady and they're difficult. But the disagreement I have there, though, with probably you and Janet is there still is that First Amendment cuts both ways. And those endorsements, you know, you have a First Amendment right to endorse a candidate. Even if you are a candidate or even if you are an elected official, I don't think your First Amendment rights stop at the doors of Carnegie Hall, do they?
No.
And I mean, my view is, I think, look, people get into office, they get a lot of political power, and then they want to endorse their favorite candidate. It's just like I've heard Republicans come to me who were upset when Dennis Dugard, you know, endorsed all these moderate,
backfired on him
endorsed all these moderate Republicans. People are like, you shouldn't do that. And then this time around, there's people who are complaining of, you're a precinct committee person, you shouldn't be endorsing so-and-so, or you're a vice president of the GOP county party, you shouldn't endorse people. I'm like, time out.
Well,
we live in America. Well, you can endorse whoever you can endorse, and you can say whatever you want.
That's been proven over and over again this last year. But okay. Anyway, that's on a whole nother thing.
Go back to 2016 when you're running for office.
Yeah. So Kermit calls and tells me he's not running. So I was very sad, and it was Valentine's. It was February 14th. I said my devotions before bed. I went to bed. I'd had a great day. And I heard this voice, and I heard God saying, "You run." And I'm like, "What?" And, you know, I'm always leery when people talk about God, so I don't, but I just have to say this because this thing, it just kept saying, "You've done the debates, you have the signs." And I did not want to run. I did not want to run. And the next morning I called some people, "What do you think about me running?" And, well, maybe, okay. And a friend went, I said, "Well, why don't you go down and I'll just try getting a few signatures. We'll see what happens." And anyway, the Argus, Joe Sneevy got a hold of that, and it was in the paper, and it just exploded. And I had people helping me and rallying, and I was running against Rich Nobles was in the race, and John Paulson. Remember? I don't know if
I remember John Paul.
They had been hanging around Kermit like vultures, waiting for him to get to leave. You know, it was, and
because they wanted to run in that central district.
No, this was at large.
It was at large.
Yes, and they wanted, but they wanted Kermit out.
Okay,
and he got out, but then I got in. And anyway, I did it. It was a scary thing, and I knew I wasn't going to make it, and I did it. And then I had those parties, you know, to the public. Nothing is worse than having a group of people at your house election night and you're losing. And you just want to go in the bedroom and cry. And you got all these supporters. And I did it 2 years. And that in 2016, I said, you know, I'm just going to teach piano. No, you know, and I did. I was teaching a piano lesson, and Mark Ropert called me from KSFY. "Theresa, I'm coming over." I said, "Mark, don't come over. I no interviews." He says, "You're winning."
I remember Mark.
And Mark was wonderful. And then pretty soon my living room was full of everybody, and there you go. But the whole thing on the council for me in 2016 to 2020, it was a constant battle of trying to do what was right for the people versus being watching this stuff happening behind the scenes. I never got on board with what was going on. I never played along with these people. I never made any deals with anyone. I was about doing what was right. And
But hold on a minute here
Yes.
before we get into what your term was like on the city council,
Yes.
because there's a lot to unpack there. You brought up this issue, and this. I think this is prescient for people who are running for office, who are thinking about running for office at the local level. It's this issue you hit the nail on the head just now. You were feeling that pressure on election night, and probably in the run up to it, to want to prevail because you wanted to deliver for those folks who had supported you, right? And those folks who had supported you, these are not like the head of economic development, the bank president, the CEO of this or that healthcare system. And, and I don't think your race, or the original race, the 2016 race, there wasn't a lot of money spent in that race either, was there?
No.
That would all change, wouldn't it? And it has.
In 2020?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. But let me also say, back in 2016, one guy, he gave me maybe a check for $200, which was very nice. Well, then he had me come in and he starts telling me, I want you to think to do this and to do this and da 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 da. And I said to him, you know what? I made an appointment. I said, I'm going to give you your check back because I'm not going to be having you tell me what to do. I'll listen to you like I listen to anybody else, but that's it. You can have your check back.
Did he take the check back?
He said, no, Theresa, thank you for saying that. No. And he never, he might have reached out to me with a concern, but it wasn't a demand.
Right.
And I had one developer try to bribe me. I mean, they really stayed away from me, but one.
Well, hold on now. When you say a bribe, do you mean giving money in exchange for official action, or was this part of the campaign?
It was about no. It was during wasn't a camp. It was giving me money for something.
Okay.
And they wanted to give me money, and I'm not going to go. And anyway, I said to that person, I think it'd be better if you gave the money to the whole council and let them decide. And nothing ever happened. So it was. And, Deborah Owen, I don't know if you know her.
I know
Now,
Deb,
Deborah,
yeah.
forgive me for bringing your name up, but she told me years ago, she said, Theresa, this is what happens is that elected people start doing, they might make decisions with people that they give, they take, but they get in a position then when they can't get out of it. They've jeopardized their integrity and they're kind of bought and paid for. And I'll never forget that because it was such a guiding force for me to say, keep it, when I went out to lunch with people, Craig Lloyd would take me to lunch, I paid my own way. No one ever got to pay anything for me. I kept it clean. You know what I'm saying? So
how much money was offered to you?
$25,000.
That is, and what was what?
I'm not going to.
Oh,
I'm
Theresa,
not going to go
come
there.
on.
I'm sorry. No,
you're giving up.
Yeah,
you are
sorry. But it happened one time, and I can see. I saw it happen to one of my colleagues who was really gung ho doing the right thing, and then I watched something happened. Some people got to him, and he totally changed. And so I pray that our newly elected people have guts. You've got to be strong.
Good for you. I mean, I'm thinking back to like Larry Pressler during Abscam when, the fake Saudi sheik came into his office and offered him thousands of dollars, offering bribes for him to vote a certain way in the Senate and or in the House, I think at that time, or maybe in the Senate. And then he really got politically popular because he was caught on video saying no.
Good.
I'm not going to take the money.
Yes.
So good for you.
Yes.
What happens next then? You're on the council. You want a seat. People are saying, Theresa, this is the people's agenda. Here's what we want.
Mm-hmm.
What were the big issues that came up during your term?
Well, of course, the parking ramp. That parking ramp thing.
Well, it was the debacle.
And I'll never forget, Christine came out, they had just had the RFP conclusion, and we're going to be doing this, and it's going to be like Fargo, and it's going to have all of these businesses wrapped around it, and it was going to be 15 stories tall, village on the river.
Right.
Remember, that was in the paper, that it was going to be so exclusive, the shops that could be there. And I'm like, okay, we're building this parking ramp. They're going to be glued to the outside. We're kind of joined together. Who are these people? Who are the investors? Well, we can't talk about that. That became the big thing. I kept saying, who are we doing business with?
Anytime I hear, whenever, like on the commission or wherever, anytime somebody tells me we can't talk about it, I am like a pig hunting truffles. Okay. That right there is a key indicator of it's a lack of transparency. Why don't you want to talk about it? Why can't the public know about this? It's all public business. Just air it out and let them know about it. What are they scared? Are they scared of something? Theresa, there's so much fear that permeates political decision making, isn't there?
Well, I don't fear about protecting the darkness. I mean, it's protecting darkness. But anyway, that became a big deal. Even the Argus had an editorial saying we need to know who the investors are, and they were fighting it. And David Feifley's, well, we can't tell you. And
so hold on a minute here. You had the attorney for the mayor telling you as a city council member, you're an elected official, we're not going to tell you who's behind this project?
The investor part, yes. But let's build this parking ramp, and we're going to use the second penny as collateral. And that's I just couldn't do it. I mean, I'm a pretty savvy person financially. I mean, it wasn't that complicated. It didn't make sense.
And then we ended up finding out who the people were eventually, didn't we?
Well, no. Well, these guarantors suddenly emerged. We had huge public meetings. I mean, people, I don't know if you remember, but it was just packed with people saying, don't do this, because they named Legacy Development as the developer. And they were going through this legal thing with the collapse of the Copper Lounge where a guy was killed. And so, hey, they're getting legal ramifications. But hey, let's have them be our builder, our person. It didn't make sense. It just didn't make sense. And in the end,
and Huther was driving the train on this the whole time, wasn't he?
But the council was with him. I mean, you had these council members who were just like, go along, get along. You know, they didn't have the guts to stand up and say, let's pause this thing. Had they paused it, it would have been the right thing to do. But they wouldn't do that. And Pat Starr and I were the only ones voting against it.
Well, it's not as if in hindsight, being 2020, right? There were red flag indicators all along the way during this process, wasn't there?
Yeah, but look at what's happened. And then Paul comes in, and he's got that Jeff Lamont guy coming in, and then that thing fell apart. And now they've got it all painted up down there. Nothing. I think it's kind of cursed.
Well,
to be honest.
It may be, but in Paul's defense, don't you think he was stuck with that albatross around his neck by the Huther administration? I mean, there was nothing you could do at that point.
He got handed a difficult situation. Yes, but we should have never let it start to be built. We should have just waited. And Matt Nelson was pushing on it as hard as anybody.
Well, they wanted to increase downtown parking capacity.
No, they wanted this thing so that they could build this village on the river.
Well, yeah, there would be 15-story building built on top of the bunker,
2 hotels.
Right?
I mean, it was just way over the top. And that comes back to humility. And I mean, spiritually, you can kind of get caught up in greed and arrogance, and we're going to be the best. And I'm about appreciating what you have. I think if I'm going to talk about it spiritually, I think the Lord is pleased when we say thank you for what we have. Let's make use of what we have. We don't always need to be chasing bigger and better here. And in the end, I think the discussion that's happening in our community is a lot of people are being left out of everything, and they just have simple needs of wanting basic services provided.
Right.
We don't need to have this big new convention center, or what am I getting for my tax dollars? And I appreciate that you have, from what I've watched, you seem to have a lot of common sense about that. I like that. Toby Doden, who you're supporting.
He's my guy.
And Toby, I appreciate that he's standing for the average person. He doesn't not a political player, right? But I was very disappointed when he endorsed Christine Erickson then. And I called his campaign office. I said, hey, he's preaching one thing, Christine's standing for this other thing. How can he's either blinded or he's not telling us the truth? Now, sorry, not trying to go against Toby.
Well, let me ask you this.
Look,
I'm not a fan of Jamie or Christine.
Okay.
I don't look at city politics as left and right or up and down. There's different spectrums, and there's a variety of interest at the municipal level that, you can look at someone. Look, I think Jamie Smith is to the far left. He may come off as being, oh, gee shucks, I'm a nice guy and I'm against the data centers. I appreciate that issue. I'm glad he's against data centers because they're ridiculous. We get into that if you want to. So I like that issue. Okay. Christine, she plays too much to the corporatist. She is not looking at a pro-taxpayer point of view. She's coming at it from a point of view of helping out special interest big business. And you know who that hurts at the municipal level? It hurts property taxpayers, because property taxpayers are asked to subsidize those quote-unquote projects, all in the name of, the big white whale of growth. Growth, we need growth. You know what? When they say it like that, it's growth for the sake of growth.
It's growth for
I
the
don't
sake
like
of
either
growth.
one of them. And I don't like the fact that Jamie Smith hangs out with Tim Walz. And Tim Walz, did you know that Tim Walz just pardoned a illegal alien sex assaulter who sexually assaulted a child? And you're going to politically support someone who gives pardons to illegal aliens who rape children? That's unacceptable to me. And I'm not going to pal around with those people either. So I don't like either one of them, because I don't think either one of them are looking out for the folks here in Sioux Falls. They're looking out for their respective far right and far left interest is what they're doing. But here's where I think the strategy comes when you're looking at both of the Republican runoff candidates endorsed Christine, and Larry Roden is the closest to Christine. Toby Doden endorsed her because, look, you'd rather have a Christine in office as a Republican when you're looking at it in terms of state strategy. You are looking at it from the point of view of city strategy from the bottom up. Toby's looking at the bottom down because he doesn't want candidates, the leader of the next big office, biggest city in Sioux Falls, to be someone who hangs out with people who pardon child molesters. And that's a fact. It just came out 2 or 3 days ago that Tim Walz did that. And Jamie and Tim Walz, they hang out, and Tim Walz would love to see Jamie as the mayor of Sioux Falls.
But let me just say this, that I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. If you get too much power, it leads to bad behavior.
Amen.
And my father, who died 24 years ago, but bless his heart, he was a Republican, but he always said we need both parties. We need a balance of power. And so I get a sense sometimes from Republicans that they would like all the Democrats to just go away. They would like this just to be a Republican United States of America. No Democrats. Let's just get rid of them. Okay, I can't. So bad behavior happens on both sides of the aisle. Okay, but the city, as I've said, this is a nonpartisan situation. I serve Democrats and Republicans, atheists, Christians on the city council. We're there to help everybody.
But let me just say this. The whole the whole nonpartisan discussion when it comes to city politics is a red herring. It's a shiny object out there that they're like, this is nonpartisan and you should not make this Republican
That's
Democrat. Right. You know what? That's irrelevant to me. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. If I'm a regular voter or if I'm sitting here as an elected official, I'm looking at this from the point of view of what are the policy ramifications that these ordinances, laws, and spending will have on the folks. What are the folks going to think about this? And how's it going to impact their lives, right? So I don't care if it's a Democrat idea or a Republican idea, which I think is a red herring. Because everybody loves to say, and I'm going to say this to the moderate Republicans here in Sioux Falls, whenever you try to say, pose an objection or try to push an issue, they'll say, well, this is a nonpartisan. This is a nonpartisan race. It's like,
but it's partisan.
Stop telling me what's partisan and nonpartisan.
This has never been such an issue as it is right now. On all these other elections I've witnessed through these years.
But corporatism is not about Republican or Democrat, because you can have liberal corporatist. For me, it's not about are you a Republican or Democrat. For me, is what's the financial impact going to be on Grandpa and Grandma being able to stay in their home? What's the impact of property taxes? As you know, the property taxes here in Sioux Falls are like 35, 6, 7% of the entire city budget is based on property taxes, and then the rest is on sales tax, and then the other is on
fees and
whatever,
I don't know the
that.
exact percentages that you just quoted off, but I will say that every year the city council votes on a property tax increase. They vote to take as much as they can. I always voted against it. Pat Starr voted against it. Kermit voted against it. And Paul and everybody else, we got to have all this money. We got to take it in. The more government takes in, the more they're going to spend.
And they pose this silly argument about if we don't take this, we irrevocably waive the growth formula factor in the future and all this nonsense.
It's just not.
It's sickening.
It's nonsense. But okay, nonetheless, I'm praying that whoever comes out on this recount is going to be a fabulous mayor. I'm praying whoever it is, because I think, as you say, I mean, Christine has her strengths, Jamie has strengths, and they're going to need to be. I'm praying that if Christine makes it, she's going to be sensitive to listening to all the people, because as a council member, she was not.
Well, neither one of these candidates has a mandate to lead.
That might not matter. I mean,
let me unpack that, and I want to get your thoughts on this. You win by 2 votes in the city of Sioux Falls, in which historically the Republican-oriented mayor wins big. Well,
I don't know. Mike Huther.
Mike Huther was a Democrat, but he tried to portray himself as being politically agnostic, which we all we all know is not the case. But let me tell you this: in Minnehaha County, normally, which Sioux Falls is in, Republicans win. Republicans dominate. Republican elected officials. And it's not as if, you need all these other votes from the outlying areas for Republicans to dominate. It's still a right of center community. What I think happened here in this race between Jamie and Christine is, number one, I don't think it was a turnout issue, because it went from like 25 to 24%, like 1%. It was a disinterest issue. People were not interested in the race. And so what happens? You had a highly motivated leftist folks supporting Jamie, but you also had a coalition of people, Jameson, Batchelor, and whoever else. Those voters, my guess, 2/3 of them went for Jamie. My guess is the other 1/3 went for Christine.
Well, my guess is some percentage just said, forget it. They didn't know which way to go.
Right.
And they just didn't go. I've talked to people who did not vote. They just said, we're not going to be a part of this either way.
Here's the issue you have now, though. You get a mayor that comes in with 2 votes. Here's my question. Are they going to drive it like they stole it?
Maybe.
Are they going to act like they have a mandate from God anyway?
Well, I think one already has, but one's already putting the crown on.
Well,
And having to take the crown off and put it back on again. But
isn't that? Yeah, I know that. I think what I have seen. I'm just going to tell you what I have seen from Jamie and Christine is a lot of restraint, and I think one side doesn't want to be restrained, but they see the political reality here, and you've got. And this is what I want to get in with you. What I want to get into with you. 36,558 people voted for either Christine or Jamie. Okay. 65 of those ballots for mayor were left blank. That means maybe they just went and took a ballot so they could maintain their voter status, or they just wanted to vote for one of the other races. You know, here's my sample. Here's my sample ballot.
Mm-hmm.
I've got Christine at the top, and I've got Jamie on there. And then I have Mike Crane and Sarah Pankonen. How do you pronounce it?
I'm not sure.
I voted for Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Hands down. Voted for her.
Mm-hmm.
Love her. She'll be a great city council,
she will,
by the way.
Well, if she can stand strong.
Well, she will. That's a whole nother podcast
right
there, right? And then you've got Oppenheimer and Don. Yeah, to me, the two bad choices right there. You know, but Oppenheimer, he cleaned up in the race. He did quite well, and he's at large, but he's with them. He's just another for sure vote for those folks. I hope these people stand strong and actually are people-centered representatives, but we'll see if they just get on the train.
Well, and here,
thought,
let me just say, one of the problems with the council, and Joe Kirby is responsible for this, and I've challenged him on this many times. But he wanted, when they did this change from the commission form to the council strong mayor form, their plan was that the council would work 10 hours, part-time, like a board of directors. Okay, so the job would be about 10 hours a week. I've said to him, okay, which people do I say, hey, I put in my 10 hours. Sorry, I can't return your phone call. Sorry, I can't do a site visit. We're going to vote on your rezoning, but I can't come out and talk to you now because my 10 hours is up. It's bizarre. It's absurd. And
Theresa,
it was a full-time job for me. I mean, I responded to emails and phone calls, and then I'd be talking to these poor people, and I'd say, did you talk to any of my colleagues? Oh, nobody returned my call. Nobody responded.
That is the intellectual fallibility of the moment. That's where people who really, really want something will just give you the sales job. You know, all these people, they complain about Toby Doden being a car salesman. You know where the worst, shadiest, nasty, most toxic sales job comes from? It comes from people in politics who really want things. That's worse than any car salesman. Car salesman is a noble job. That's a profession where somebody is selling products to people who can get their lives, deliver their children safely to and from church and work and all of that. There's nothing wrong with being a salesman. You know what there is? There's a problem with people who want things politically. They will say and do many, many things to tell you. And the question is, do their arguments pass the test of time or not? And I think what you're pointing out is, with Joe Kirby trying to tell you that it's only going to be a 10-hour-a-week job or 10-hour-a-month job, it's not like sitting on the board of directors for the boys' club, the Boys and Girls Club, is it?
No, absolutely not. It's set up so that you have to take the word of the department heads. So the council is just expected to just pass whatever's brought in front of them. I never did.
They want you to be a caretaker or trustee. They don't want you getting involved in the weeds and the guts of
You don't need to ask. And I would ask questions. I've got a pretty good memory. I take notes, and then they'd be up there talking, and I'd say, "Hey, didn't you say this 3 months ago?" Oh boy, they really didn't like that.
So let's get into that. One of the areas where you started digging in was, and I mean, we live in the Midwest. We live in South Dakota. You got to plow snow. You got to plow snow.
Oh, the snow.
You got to plow snow. Yeah. And here comes, little Theresa saying, look, You got all these people who get a big pile of snow piling up in their driveways, and we're going to stop it. And it's not like this is some weird alien concept, these snow gates that you put on snow plows, and they're all over the country before they were here.
Kermit Stakers is the one who brought that up. And so I called, Bismarck used him. That was his inspiration. I called Bismarck. I interviewed the mayor. I interviewed the public works person. The mayor put that on the ballot years ago. And so in 2010, that was one of my campaign issues. And I had men saying, "Oh, Stehly, that won't work. That's so stupid. Your intentions are good. Oh, that." But one thing that happened is when I was doing my research in Bismarck, the public works people, I talked with them about how they worked, and I talked to Sioux Falls Public Works. Oh, well, we called Bismarck. They told us they didn't work, and they blah, blah, blah. And so I called Bismarck back. Did you talk with our people here? No. They had never heard from Sioux Falls. What's that called, Joe?
It's called a lie.
It's called a lie. And that was my first experience where people just say things sometimes just to say it. And anyway, I got
That is what I'm talking about with regard to when people want something politically, they will give you the most asinine, irrelevant arguments possible just to get the thing, to get what they want.
And once they have it, they got it. And you talked about somehow earlier you were talking about how things play out, but the public has a very short memory. And politicians know that. City officials know that they get things passed and then it's contentious for a while and then they move on.
They prey on the ignorance of the public.
And that's why I started doing the Stehly report. I don't know if you ever got it, but I mailed that thing out at my own expense. And I would put in there who voted, specifically who voted for these things. What was the thing? People don't know what's going on in our community. And the Argus has unfortunately dwindled. Randall Beck and I used to go back and forth about how they're not doing enough to engage the public. And their readership was just dwindling. The Dakota Scout, I love Joe. I love Jonathan. Just had a thing on Facebook about Matt Paulson being involved with that, which I don't think is good.
He's an owner. He's a partial owner.
And I don't think he should be. They should have not have gone into business with Matt.
Doesn't that go back to the first? Let me ask you this, though. Doesn't it go back to the First Amendment?
No, I'm not going to say that.
Isn't a business person allowed to own a newspaper, and then that newspaper may or may not report on the business person who gets involved in political activities in the same community?
Yeah, when you got someone who is just so involved in campaigns and got their fingers in so many things, it would have been better if they had not had him included. And I've encouraged Joe to cut himself off and maybe get a different investor, sell some shares, whatever.
I saw that.
Yeah, that's my opinion. Okay, I've had experiences with Matt Paulson, and I think he's got too many special deals going on under the surface. And I do not believe that he doesn't talk to them about certain issues.
Well, here's one thing I think for sure. Here's what I think for sure, Theresa. When I saw the $100,000 PAC contribution come out in the mayor's race, I thought to myself, those people want something, and they're going to expect. They are going to. They're business people, and they want return on investment, ROI. And that's why I go back to this issue of, okay, it's a 2-vote race. I want to know from people, are these politicians now, even the ones who received huge mega contributions from these people, are they going to govern the way that the people, that the results of the race suggested? Or are they just going to ignore that and they're going to move full speed ahead? Because they're donors, they're investors, they want ROI. The voters want restraint. The donors and investors want full speed ahead.
Well, and I'm going to say this about Dana Dykhouse and First Premier Bank. They were, and I believe they probably still are, the banking institution of Sioux Falls. And
Which means that the city of Sioux Falls, all their money, they put all their cash in the bank.
They do all the
Right.
transactions.
And then the bank, of course, benefits from that because they earn interest and
exactly,
and then they use the money to help invest in other, right,
well, and so
to give out loans to
said
other
to-
customers.
I'm all about passing the business around. And back when Sean Pritchard came in with Paul Tenhagen, I met with him. He's our finance director. And I said, maybe we should be passing that relationship to other banks, giving other people a chance to vie for that. And I asked my banker at Wells Fargo, would you guys like to be the Bank of Sioux Falls? He said, absolutely.
Of course they would. Any bank would like to
And
service
so
the state's largest community.
How often is that reviewed? How often is that reviewed? But Dana Dykhouse has such an input, or that's not the right word. He's got so much
Influence.
invested in these. He's putting so much money into these campaigns that there is something else that I believe he's expecting.
Well, he has a lot of influence. I mean, what I think is interesting, though, about Dana Dykhouse and this whole economic development crew is in the run-up to the primaries, this winter, they had to put advertisements on TV extolling the virtues of economic development.
Right, yes.
And I'm thinking to myself, I'm watching these ads on TV, and I see this big president of a big successful corporation that, First Premier, which was previously involved with significant amount of predatory lending and governmental oversight involved in it as a result of that. And I'm thinking to myself, why are you telling us, the voters, what you think about economic development?
Mm-hmm.
Why weren't they putting ads on TV about mom and pop shops that get government economic development money? You want to know why? Because they don't.
They're not.
It's just what it is. It's big money for other big corporations. You know what was so interesting about when Amazon came to Sioux Falls? Amazon didn't take the economic development money, did they? I mean, they were offered the land, but Amazon could have taken a significant amount of benefits from the state of South Dakota or the city of Sioux Falls, right? Through Sioux Falls offers, the sales tax rebate program? Does the city still offer that?
That I don't know.
Okay. I mean, there are a number of benefits, but how come the guy who runs the donut shop,
exactly,
the guy who runs the tire shop, the small business owner who starts up an accounting shop or an accounting business, they're not getting any government handouts? They're not getting any government economic development.
Well, and so also involved with that is that people are not aware of this, I believe. But there's three entities. There's the Sioux Falls Development Foundation, Forward Sioux Falls, and the Chamber. So you got these three entities. And when I was on the council, I sat down with one of the directors of that, and I said, help me understand what this is all about. And it reminds me of the Holy Trinity. Because, I mean, it's kind of mysterious. You can't quite separate them. He showed me this triangular thing, these three circles that ran into each other. And so but in the midst of this, I wanted to know this because we were being asked to vote on, I believe, between $3 and $4 million each year that we were just giving to this organizational Trinity. And so I'm like, this is kind of mysterious. Where is this money going? And so Bob Munt was the new guy, and it was my last year on the council. And I was up there, and I said to him, and Matt Paulson was somehow involved with this whole thing at that point. And I said, I'd like to look at your books. If you're getting that much money from us, we should be able to see how you're spending it. Oh, no, we can't do that. And that should be an ordinance as well. If you take any money from the city, you've got to open your books up to us.
Yeah, amen, sister. Once the government money leaves the government coffer and it goes to those nonprofits, see, this is the whole thing. The nonprofits have a deal with whoever's in control of City Hall, and what they do is they do the work that City Hall doesn't want to, and then what they do, there's no transparency. And there's two things that lack when you give money to the nonprofits. They lack transparency and they lack accountability. Because you know what? The voters no longer have, if I'm a voter, can I just walk into a nonprofit's office and say, I want to come to your meetings?
Nope.
I want to have public input at your meeting. I want to vote on who your board of directors is at the nonprofit. No, 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 no. That's why City Hall gives a ton of money to the nonprofits, because the nonprofit can do no accountability, no transparency. They can just go out there and execute whatever it is they want done with that money.
I'm not opposed to helping nonprofits. I'm not, but I do think that their books need to be open. We have to. If you're taking money from us, from the city, you need to be open to that. And I'll during that COVID, during my last time in office, we were doing this apartment thing, and Rich McCorris was on that whole, he wasn't elected yet, but we were giving money out to landlords to pay for rent, and there was no accountability for what they were doing with it. And I was asking for this, and it was just one of those things, where things just are not adding up. The dots are not connecting, and it gets real murky, and we'll get back to you later, and then they never do. And so that comes back to clarity, integrity, accountability, that we have every right to ask for that as citizens and for our government.
Amen. So you're basically labeled as a troublemaker on the council simply because you start saying things like transparency, accountability, and we're not going to do this. Well, you're probably not a team player, and this probably extends to.
And
what? We should probably have Janet Brecky come in sometime as well, because they were chasing her down.
But you know what I said at one point, because they were like, "Oh, we've got to collaborate," blah blah blah, and I said, "You know what? I'm not going to collaborate with corruption."
They weren't collaborating; they wanted to conspire.
Well, to me, everything should be done out in the open. And
right.
These backroom deals, it's like, no, thank you. That's anyway. So, you wanted to talk about the recount?
Yeah,
maybe we should fast forward here.
We are.
Okay.
So they label you as trouble with a capital T. Thank you, Music Man, and they recruit Alex Jensen to run against you. And this is where the Dugard Mafia starts coming in, and Dugard recruits Alex, and he starts calling up his money people, and they pump in literally six figures.
130,000.
Yeah, they needed six figures to get rid of little old Theresa Stehly, who was looking after gardening ordinances and snow gates.
Mm-hmm.
My Lord, $130,000 to get rid of someone like you? Why spend so much money on a race like that? And then the guy does his 4 years and gets out of there.
Mm-hmm.
But
and my understanding is he wasn't real respectful to people who came in to testify either. So you've got this kind of a dismissive, arrogant club.
Well, I guess that it's unfortunate that's what the Dugard money buys. I would think Dennis Dugard would want very respectful, open people who want to collaborate with others. Apparently they don't. I
just saw Dennis at the Republican convention. I went up to him. I said, Dennis, I've always had the greatest respect for you. I've heard him speak several times about his family, his parents, and I always felt that Dennis had a good heart.
So did I.
But he has kind of put his trust, his energy into places that I don't quite understand.
So I agreed. So you and Alex Jensen are in a race.
Mm-hmm.
They spent $130,000. You probably spent what?
17, I think.
Yeah, geez. That's horrible return on. And these people are all business people too, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Where did they learn where'd they go to business school at? That's the worst return on investment I've ever seen. But anyway, it's a huge per vote share. Ridiculous amount of money spent per vote. But in the 2020 municipal race between you and Alex Jensen, 27,000 people and change voted. Alex bested you initially by 110 votes. There were 13 bad votes. We're going to talk about that. And in the end, he won by 97. So Jensen had 13,791 votes, and Theresa Stehly had 13,694. And that meets the 2% or less threshold that entitles you by law to be involved in a recount.
Mm-hmm.
And just so you know, Theresa, I fully litigated a 2-vote race for the county commission down in Union County a number of years ago. I'm talking, I went all the way from, I was the attorney who represented the losing party in that case. He lost by 2 votes. I litigated that thing all the way from recount, and then we actually had an election challenge, and we had a trial in front of then Judge Jensen, who is now the Supreme Court Chief Justice, Steve Jensen, and we lost that race. And then my client decided not to appeal the race to the Supreme Court, and we found a number of errors that the county auditor had made in that race in Union County. Eventually, that county auditor would go on to quit because of that. She quit at the end of her term. She decided not to run for re-election. She saw the writing on the wall there. But I have been involved in the legal end of these, and I've done a number of other election law cases since then. But I've been involved in this, and I have always found this process fascinating. And I want to help take the mystery out of it. That's why I called you and said, hey, let's get you on to interview. I want to get your take on the recount you went through. So you end up, initially, you lost by 110 votes.
Right. And well, let's back up.
Yeah.
COVID. So what happened? COVID, the election was supposed to be April, maybe 17th. And this tidal wave of COVID hits in March.
And they actually talk about that.
Well,
the mechanics of the race.
Everything's shutting down.
Right.
And so I actually, and people are being told not to leave their homes. We're talking about isolating in place, or it.
Right.
So I
and then they
reached out
sent
to
out,
Christy Noem.
and then they sent out the applications for absentee ballots.
Right, but I reached out to Christy Noem first, and I said I'd like to change this to the June 2nd election. I think, or whatever that June,
the first Tuesday
primary.
in June. First Tuesday in June.
I wanted to postpone our election.
Yep.
And she did. Now I don't know why she was in charge, but she had the power to do that. And so then, because people couldn't leave, so then Steve Barnett made the decision to send out these absentee ballots to everybody.
And he was the state secretary of state.
It's right.
Yes.
And so
initially, because of the COVID, they wanted to send out ballots. They wanted to send absentee ballots out to everyone initially.
I thought that they did send absentee ballots.
They sent out applications for absentee ballots, and then you could fill them in. And then after you sent your application in, you were given your absentee ballot.
Okay.
Because there were other states, more liberal states than us, who were actually just send the ballots out.
Okay, I thought they
like
said
Colorado style. Colorado just sends the ballots out to every single voter. Yeah.
Well, anyway, so this is going on, and then of course the absentee period is extended into June,
right?
And we're doing all this COVID stuff, and people are so angry about the shutdown, the masks, the having to have mandatory vaccines. And I have people calling me, Stehly, I've got my absentee vote here. How are you going to be voting on this? I'm going to, and it was the most stressful thing I've ever gone through, because I'm walking a tight line, a tight wire of trying to help people and it was just incredible.
Senior citizens were incredibly stressed during that period of time.
And people were dying. I mean,
right.
it was insane. So we've got this voting going on, and Alex Jensen is running commercials, and they're their motto was, we're going to make it smooth again. The council will become smooth.
And explain what was so unsmooth for the majority.
Because we were debating things. Janet and Pat and I weren't just eating everything they put on our plate. I mean, we were asking questions. They couldn't stand it. And I want a government where people are debating things and where we're hashing it out, and we don't just go along with everything.
It goes back to the insecurity issue.
Doing the best for the citizens. And I constantly I would always bring citizens into it. I always encourage people to come and speak. That was part of what I saw as my mission, was to involve people and bring them to the table.
Well, that was troublesome for them. That was rather
they
irksome.
They wanted to have the there's all. So anyway, so
the election happens.
The election happens. However, it doesn't. So it starts and
the
election goes on and on.
Right.
It takes 2 days to count the ballots.
And let's just take a step back here and put a finer point on this. Normally Sioux Falls city elections would happen in April.
Right.
And then if there was necessity for runoff, that would happen several weeks later. In this instance, because of COVID, what happened is the governor, the Secretary of State, and then in conjunction with the city, which is home rule charter, they pushed the election date back from that April date to coincide with
the primary,
the state primary.
Right.
And that goes towards this whole issue. If you remember, for years, people would say, we can't do that, even though there's a number of cities around South Dakota have been doing it for 50 years, i.e. Rapid City and others. Anyway, so we fast forward to Election Day, which is primary day. So we've got the Republican, Democrat primaries, and in conjunction with City of Sioux Falls. And that changes the dynamics of the race as well, doesn't it? Because you go from a smaller universe of voters in April to a much larger universe of voters on the first Tuesday in June who had those ballots, right?
Right. But I think a bulk of those were absentees that were cast. I don't know the numbers. I would suspect the majority of people, it was an absentee situation.
So election night comes, you get the results.
No results.
Okay, what happened?
There was no results. They had to stop and pick it up. They were counting and they couldn't get it all done. So I went to bed. It hadn't been done yet.
Was Bob Blitz the auditor?
Yes,
then?
And they picked it up the next day. They did not finish it until like the afternoon the next day.
What was the holdup? The machines?
There were too many ballots. They weren't prepared for the whole thing. I don't think they started the absentee counting until later either.
Okay.
So it was just huge. They couldn't get through it all. And so I went to bed that night. I mean, it was excruciating. You don't know if you've won or lost. And
right.
So then the next day, the tabulation gets formalized, and then it's this discrepancy. We got the 110 votes.
What went into the process? What went into your analysis or thought process of, because just so voters know out there, recounts in South Dakota are not automatic. They have to be requested by one of the parties, obviously, typically the losing party.
Right.
What went into your analysis or thought process of, I got 110 votes, 27,000 and change in terms of total number of votes. I've got to recount this thing.
Well, somewhere in the midst of this, I'd gotten the percentage that you needed to have, and I was well within that. So it just made sense that we're going to do a recount.
Okay.
And I don't even know where all the information about how this proceeded came from. I can't remember. It was a long night. There were some very long nights, and you're just waiting. You're trying to.
You must have thought, hey, you're under the 2% threshold, so you're eligible. But there must have been some thought of, I can find 110 votes. Or was it just...
well, of course, you just don't know. You really don't know. So I felt I owed it to myself to go that route, to take this.
Do you owe it to the voters? Do you owe it to your supporters too?
Well, of course. But I will say that I think in this last election, on June 2nd, those people went through the same thing that night because there was still a question mark. When we went to bed, I stayed up till the 1:30.
So did I. I saw it. Yeah.
It still wasn't quite, there was like, remember they had 5 provisional ballots to look at. So it really wasn't quite done yet.
Right.
So I really could empathize with those 2 candidates. I know.
But going back to your race, Theresa, you wake up the next morning, you get the results, sometime later that afternoon.
Exactly.
You're like, hey, I owe it to the voters as well as to my own campaign. We're going to recount this thing.
Mm-hmm.
What unfolded now? And just so so listeners know, I got some photos here. We're going to break out. But what happened next then?
Well, so then I don't know if Tom Greco was communicating or maybe I got it from Joe Sneevy, but then it was you get to pick a representative, and I had X amount of days to announce it.
Who was your representative?
It was Randy Seiler. And
for folks who don't know, Randy was a longtime Democrat in South Dakota. He was a U.S. attorney under Barack Obama. He had some law enforcement background, prosecutor, whatnot, and then. But Randy was a well-esteemed attorney in the state of South Dakota.
And Randy had been supportive of me in my city council activity. He had given me money for my reelection. I didn't ask him for money. So even though he's a Democrat, he appreciated what I did as a city council member.
Well, and this is something I've wanted to dive in with you about this. Do you think that maybe Randy also helped you because the Democrats saw the huge do-guard, this Republican machine coming in and trying to take this seat from somebody who is for the little guy, you, and they're like, hey, we need to get behind Theresa because we got to push back on this?
Well, except throughout I felt Democrats supported me before this happened. Throughout my tenure, I think Democrats respected me, appreciated me, as did Republicans. I didn't look at them, their party. I looked at them as people.
Of course.
So Randy saw me as a person. Did I agree with everything he stood for? No. I have dear friends that are Democrats. Do you think? I love them. They're dear friends. They're not demons. They're my dear friends.
Of course they're not. They're people.
They're people.
They're humans with human dignity.
So Randy, what happened was people were telling me things. Oh, you're going to have an attorney as your representative. That wasn't really made clear to me who you would have. And so what's interesting, people are coming out of the woodwork. And Jay Huizinga from Kello, he's the head of Kello, he wanted to be my representative. And I thought that was very interesting because Kello wasn't necessarily, always.
Do you mean like a PR representative?
No, to sit on the recount board. He wanted to be the guy to sit on the recount board for me. And that's a very important position.
What did Jay know about electoral recounts?
Well, I think some of the business people said, get on there so you can kind of just fast track this thing, get it done.
You thought he was a ringer for? You thought Jay was a ringer for the opposition?
Why he was offering for that. But what I became aware of is that whoever you choose, that's your representative. You can't speak during the recount.
Right.
So if you think this, these ballots, this thing should be looked at or whatever, you can't just talk up. You have to have that person speaks for you. So you need somebody who, just like a defense attorney, who's going to be in your court. And then,
I want to show the listeners this, and I'm going to post this online and everything because it may be a little hard to see. This is Randy Seiler and Judge Rodney Steele. He was
Brookings.
Yeah, Brookings. That's the third judicial circuit. And then that is a very young, who is that?
John Hanson.
That is a very young John Hanson.
John Hanson.
And John Hanson was working at the Redstone law firm. That's Matt McCauley's law firm. Right there, folks. That is a very young John Hanson who was representing Alex Jensen. Now, John Hanson would later go on to have a amazing political metamorphosis and move from one end of the table to the other on the political spectrum, hasn't he? You know, he's no longer running with the Matt McCauleys and the Alex Jensens of the world, is he?
Well,
you're not sure, but I am.
I'm okay. Well,
anyway,
there was
tell me about,
But
tell me about that.
The way that Randy got involved is that, I didn't have any money, and so I couldn't afford to hire anyone. I'm a Republican. This was like a little strange because I felt like this Republican thing was coming against me. And
it was.
And I hadn't done anything to align myself with Democrats, so it was just more, it was a whole other thing of getting me to shut up.
Here's the thing, Theresa, again, it's not about Republican versus Democrat. It's about corporatism. It's about how far or how close are you to wanting city and property tax dollars to subsidize business interest. That's what the real issue.
And I'm going to call that corporate welfare.
Yeah, the spectrum is not left or right. The spectrum is, where is the property tax money flowing to? Is it going to you and me, or is it going to subsidize other businesses?
And I thought Republicans believed in small government.
Some do,
I thought
some
they
don't.
believed in limited government and efficient government and integrity.
This is another picture right here for the folks at home. We've got young John Hanson. We've got Tom Greco. I've always said to Tom, I've known Tom in the Army Reserve, okay? I thought Tom was born with gray hair. For folks who don't know, Tom Greco's had gray hair forever. Doesn't matter how old the guy is. And then we've got Judge Stehly, and then who else have we got in there? We got Randy sitting down.
And Stacey Koistra.
You got Stacey Koistra, who's a city attorney, but you see who's in the background right there with that checkered shirt? That is Steve Perkins. And I say this with all due deference to Steve, but he's a well-esteemed member of the GOP establishment. He's also a member. He's also a Lincoln County citizen. He was at the GOP convention here recently. Him and his wife were. So what was going on in that photo?
Why was he there? Well,
he's a precinct committee man.
No, why was he in that? Why was he at my recount?
Good question.
Yeah, why was he at my recount? Yeah, so they were just discussing how the logistics of it. That was before it got started.
I don't know why Steve was there.
I like that other one. No, that other one. So when we get there, all of these attorneys are there, and these people against the wall. I'm like, I went over to him. I said, "What do you guys think? This is like an FBI investigation, or what? What do you think we're gonna?"
Theresa, this photo is the best, and I'll tell you why. This kind of sums up what was going on in the Stehly versus Jensen. This wasn't a fight between you and Alex Jensen. This is a part of a larger existential fight for who's going to control where your money goes.
Wow.
When you're a city taxpayer, right? So here's what we have.
I didn't know that.
So here's what we have. We have Matt McCauley there in the corner. We got somebody probably aligned with him. We've got Steve Perkins wearing his COVID mask, by the way, which didn't work. He's got somebody sitting next to him. He's got another lady right there. I think she was a member of the law firm. And then you've got young Alex Jensen there. Then you got Judge Stehly there, and you got, I think, Stacey sitting next to him. But right there, folks, you have a
and Matt McCauley was there too.
I pointed him out.
Okay.
You have a battalion of attorneys making sure that whose hand was going to touch the wheel, the ship of state moving forward. And it wasn't going to be little old Theresa, was it?
I took all those photos, by the way.
And then we have Joe Sneevy right there, a young Joe Sneevy, and I don't know who's hanging out with him. At first, I looked at that photo and I was like, "Is that?"
I think it's a reporter.
Yeah, is that a reporter? Okay, so we've got that, and then just so folks know, this is how democracy works, or this is how we're a constitutional republic, of course, but I use democracy in the larger sense with a small d, of course. But when we're talking about how we count votes, spoiled ballots. What's a spoiled ballot, and why is it just hanging out in a box here? What's going on there? It says 2020 primary, city and school. Spoiled ballots, absentee. What is that?
And that's the box that Randy insisted on opening for me. I mean,
Right.
that David or Stacy Koister agreed to look at the spoiled ballots, and I believe that's where I got my extra 13 votes.
Right. So for the folks at home, just so they know, because not everybody knows this stuff, so we're educating on them. That's a sample ballot. That's between Christine and Jamie Smith. There will be times where somebody will rest their pen. You know, you're supposed to fill the oval in, right? We're using optical scan ballots. You may get somebody like me who's a little shaky who walks in there, or maybe somebody who's elderly or whatever. They rest their pen on one oval, but then they eventually fill in the other oval. Well, when you run it through the machine, it may come back as spoiled or blank and invalid. Now, what Leah Anderson has told me that for this most recent election, of course, is that those ballots went to the resolution board and have already had humans reviewed them. Do you know if that was the case in your race?
I do not.
So what a resolution board is that's where you get like a weird looking ballot, like oh, both are filled in or nothing's filled in. What's going on here? But any self-respecting attorney or anybody who understands election law is going to go to the spoiled ballots, and they're going to look to make votes up there, aren't they? So do you remember why Randy was telling you that he wanted to go to those spoiled ballots first?
No, it wasn't first. It was in the
Okay.
midst of it.
Okay.
Because what's going to happen is that these guys are going to touch every ballot.
Yes.
They're going to look at it. You have three people looking at it, plus it's run through the machine again. So then that was, I think, towards the end of the process where they were discussing this box of things, and let's open the box. Should we open? And then they looked at the box. And they were also looking for a stamp. That if there's something's missing, a stamp.
Right, on an optical scan ballot under South Dakota law, it's required to have the precinct stamp on it.
So that there's going to be these technicalities, and I'm not sure if I gained any through the tabulator. I don't know if that.
You eventually gained 13. You
Right.
eventually gained 13. Do you know why?
That's what I'm saying. I think
Okay.
something came out of the spoiled box.
Okay.
Something was, but I don't know if anything showed up differently when they ran it through the machines.
Yeah, let's face it. Most of the ballots are going to, statistically speaking here, most of the ballots are going to be just fine.
Exactly.
But you're going to go to some of those provisional ballots, and for and just for the folks listening out there, you're going to make up ground with ballots, most of them, on the basis of physical characteristics, meaning was the oval filled in properly.
Right.
Now, there may also be the opportunity for legal characteristics, meaning did the resolution board act properly? Now, that's something that can only be adjudicated in circuit court after the fact. Like, let's say Jamie still loses the recount, but he identifies, or his representatives, his team identify legally flawed characteristics in the conduct of the election. You can only do that in circuit court. You can't do that in the recount. The recount will only adjudicate physical characteristics of the ballot.
So what happened, I was on the absentee counting Tuesday morning, 2 weeks ago. So there were, I believe, 14 tables. I was table 13, but I think there was one more. And there's 3 people at each table. We counted the absentee ballots that morning. And so and you have to have a Democrat and Republican at each table.
Yes.
So we had a ballot. This is these 3 people of one of these tables. I mean, I don't know who else had this, but there was an absentee package that had something questionable about it. We, the three of us, got to make the decision if we're going to accept it or not. We decided to accept it. What about these other tables? See, that's enough. I don't know where those ones went, but we could have said, no, we're not going to accept this. That would have been thrown out. Where did those go?
Was that ballot set aside and put in the separate envelope, or was it put in with the? Was it put in the remainder? Was it put in the big bin with all the rest?
It was, yeah.
Okay.
Because we accepted it.
So really, there's going to be some issues that come down here. They're going to have to physically review 38,000 ballots potentially. Most of them won't have a problem, but some will.
Well, and if there was a problem with maybe it not the outside of the envelope not looking right, then that could be thrown out. You wouldn't even open it up. You'd say this doesn't look right.
Right.
So those are, I don't know if,
but those are supposed to go. Those are supposed to go to a resolution board though after the fact.
After
right?
they're thrown, my understanding was that our group made the deciding.
Oh.
We were the deciders.
Well, that could be fodder for Jamie Smith to try to find his 2 votes, won't it?
It was going to be fascinating.
So tell me, you're going through this process. Then your representative is Randy. You had Rod Steele
and show
in
them
there.
the picture of all the ballots there.
Yeah.
So they had those nicely stacked up, and
these are the ballots. And again, folks,
through.
I'll post this online. But these are the ballots of each precinct. They're required to maintain those in piles for each precinct. You're going through the recount. What's going through your head?
Well, I just didn't find a lot of hope. It felt overwhelming to see all of those Republican operatives there, and I mean, I just was like, what is this about? I mean, what's this big tidal wave of oppression coming at me for? And so I was just praying that I could get through the day. I mean, it was something I needed to do, and
well, the machine wants what the machine gets what the machine wants, Theresa.
Sometimes, yeah.
Right.
And let me just say this on a side note, and I said this to Christine because she was part of the effort with Alex Jensen, and that they wanted me gone, but I said to her just before this the runoff, I said, Christine, I think you meant to do me harm with getting me out. I mean, that's how it felt, that they meant to do me harm. And I said, you know what? It did me fabulous good, because had I not lost that election, I would never have gone to work with these Native children and had this experience that has been so full. So my message, that's my children.
And I'll post this too.
Yeah.
These are your kids
my kids.
God closes one door,
and
he opens another.
Like 260 children I got to work with, most rewarding thing I've ever done. And I never would have taken off and left to do that if this hadn't happened. So it was, and it taught me so much.
And
you went so much.
You used your just so folks are clear, you went to the Standing Rock. You live here in Sioux Falls. You maintain a home here.
Yes.
But you spent a number of years after you lost the election
commuting back and forth.
Right.
Yes.
At Standing Rock Reservation.
In McLaughlin. Yes.
Yeah. And just so folks know, that's way up north, right?
330 miles away. Yes. Yeah. And I had a wonderful administrator, and they let me take a lot of time off so I could come back and forth to Sioux Falls. But it was just incredible what I got to do with these kids, and planting seeds of hope, and seeing the most destitute situations you can imagine. Kids most of them have no parents, and I was like their grandmother, their mother. And so it was very difficult to leave when I retired in May, but I mean, it was time to come home.
Well, and I think a lot of South Dakotans don't understand that 4 of the poorest counties in America are located within our state borders here. And those 4 counties all happen to be on reservation land. So folks can do the math. They can figure out the fact that there's not a lot of economic opportunity on some reservations here in South Dakota. So it's very difficult.
Yeah, it's such a complicated issue. And my whole perception of what's going on there got turned upside down as I spent 6 years there. I mean, I know it deeply. I know deeply what's going on. And so it was a great, great opportunity. But one thing I will say is I'm going to continue to help people in our community. I've already been doing that through these years since I was on the council, continuing to advocate for people, to stand up for the rights of people to participate. And again, we have a chance now with the new leadership and whoever comes out as the mayor, they have a chance to really open this up. And I know we may disagree on this. Mike Huther and I were not the best of friends. But one thing he did that I really respect, he had those listen and learning sessions. Remember those? He'd meet at different restaurants. And Mike he did engage with the public.
He did.
And
he would go to different small groups, and he would open himself up to take the shots.
He did. And he listened to me, and Paul, on the other hand, Paul Tenhagen has a tendency he shuts down and then he shuts you out. He doesn't have the ability. Paul, I hope you grow because you've got to be able to come back to people who you don't agree with and to talk about it and to find common ground. And I think that comes with age, with maturity.
Or you can just go raise millions of dollars and drum them out of office. Right.
And so you get surrounded with yes people, But we need dialogue. We have a very complex community. It's complicated, complex. We need a leader who's going to listen to all sides, all parts of Sioux Falls.
So as we wrap up here real quick, what advice do you have for Jamie and Christine?
Well, I continue to have that wonderful respect for each other. And I would say, I said this to Christine already. I referenced Abraham Lincoln. When he got elected, he surrounded himself with some of his fiercest enemies because they were the smartest. They did the best job. And that's the worst thing you can do is get elected and just bring your friends and family into the administration. The same old, same old.
The last thing we like to do on this podcast is we like to talk a little politics. We've got a runoff race on July 28th for governor. Toby Doden on one side, Larry Roden on the other side. Do you want to make some news today? Who are you endorsing? Who are you supporting?
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. You encourage everyone to vote in that race, though,
Absolutely, right? Yes. Everyone who can. If you're a Republican.
Right.
Yeah. I do have a prediction.
We want to hear it.
Well, no, I've been hearing this. Now here's the deal. Whoever makes it in the runoff. A possibility of somebody else stepping into the Democratic position.
So you're hearing that Dan Allers will be replaced?
Possibly.
With who?
Billy Sutton.
So the Democrat strategy here.
No, I don't know. That's not. That's just.
Well, we like the goss. We like the gossip. So if what I'm hearing from you
Stephanie
is correct,
Sandlin.
Yeah, So Doden wins the primary. Doden wins the runoff. Ostensibly Doden, because he's most dangerous to
right.
the establishment. So to speak.
Yes.
Which also means he's probably the best bet for regular folks. But Larry Roden stays in there. It's kind of business as usual.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. That's right.
So you get a Toby Doden in there. And so if I understand correctly, the theory goes that, we'll run somebody like Billy Sutton or Stephanie Herseth because they could take Doden out. Mm-hmm. Is that essentially what your folks are saying?
Well, they're not my folks.
These
they're not my. I talk to lots of people.
Right.
So that's just floated around a little bit.
Okay.
So, who knows? This is wild and crazy. We don't know.
There you go. I think you just summed up the election season in 2 words: wild and crazy.
Wild and crazy.
There you
yes.
go.
Yes. But thank you for this time to visit and tell my story.
Okay, folks, there you go. Theresa Stehly has been our guest for the last 2 hours. This is going to be fantastic. Time flies, doesn't it, Theresa, when we're having fun? My timer right here is saying we're at 2:01:17. So this is fantastic. Yes. This is going to be a great podcast for folks over the long 4th of July weekend. Remember, America 250. Mm-hmm. We love America here at the Undaunted podcast. This country provides fantastic opportunity and safety and security for folks. One of those rights is First Amendment, which we talked about today.
Yes.
Use your First Amendment rights this weekend. Have a great 4th of July, America 250. If you get some time while you're driving or you're sitting on the beach or you're out in a boat or whatever, download the Undaunted podcast from the undauntedpodcast.com. We're on Substack at the Undaunted Podcast. We're on Facebook at the Undaunted Podcast. Download this. If you want to know about some Sioux Falls political history, this is a podcast that you need to hear with our fantastic guest, Theresa Stehly. I'm your host, Joel Ahrens, and on behalf of my co-host, Chuck Jones, thank you for tuning in. We will see you on the next episode of The Undaunted, the Man in the Arena podcast.